Mauga nerfs have finally rolled in, but after being the dominant tank pick by far for half a season, what other tanks are going to rise to fill the top spot? Let's get right into the tank tiers for the Season 8 mid-season patch. The headliner of the patch is massive Mauga nerfs, but they've only nerfed his sustainability, not damage, and that means that Wrecking Ball is still not off the hook. He's the only hero in F tier and the worst tank by far. It wouldn't be so bad if it was just a new hero countering him hard, but he's been this bad for too long. I was actually expecting some sort of change this patch, even a minor adjustment would do, but there's nothing to be seen. The actual minor adjustment this patch went to Sombra, making it even worse for Ball, although a couple of stealth passive changes aren't exactly going to get you focused harder than you already are. Being a dive hero and having insane mobility should give Ball a lot more options, like forcing the objective or setting up a boop engage. Instead, he's one of the slowest dive tanks, ironic considering how fast his grapple is. Doomfist, D.Va, and Winston all have way faster engages that also don't need as much time as Ball does to set up. He also has no advantage in the tank duel. Even his damage is negligible against Winston, notoriously the worst tank for fighting other tanks. There's not much else to say, but that Ball definitely drew the short straw when it came to transitioning to Overwatch 2, and he still hasn't been buffed back to viability. Compared to the new wave of tanks, none of his abilities come even close to being as good as theirs. Ball is literally so bad that there's even a whole tier between him and the rest of the tanks. If you're looking to grind to get better on tanks, use the link in the description to get access to a GameLeap membership, with guides for both mechanically intensive tanks like Doomfist and Jungle Queen on top of macro courses on how to best play Winston strategically. There's a lot of options for whatever hero you're trying to learn, so check it out and enjoy the video. Moving up to C tier is Zarya. Both before and after Mauga, most tanks have a common enough niche that they can be played as a main without being totally troll. The weakest has to be Zarya, but her bubbles are still amazing when used on allies. It may sound like a stupid obvious take, but it's where she actually shines as a hero in Overwatch 2. Her self bubble is just not good enough to tank the super high close range damage in the game right now. Projected bubble is a good ability for sure, but with just 200 HP and a 2-second duration, it's not that reliable, and every bubble needs to be timed well to keep up with the game. Outside of her allied bubble, she doesn't offer her team much else. Even in the tank duel, she only consistently beats D.Va. Everyone else can either hit her backline more times than she can peel them, or just run down Zarya herself. Just one bubble force makes it unbelievably easy, and even Mauga can still effectively do that with good planning. None of the changes actually affected Zarya, she's just been like this for a while. Where she's not really a bad hero, the rest of the game is just power creeped far beyond what she can handle. In the middle of C tier is Reinhardt, and you would think he would be doing better after Mauga nerfs, but instead of Mauga, now Orisa is gatekeeping him again with her fall off completely removed. Now that Orisa is dealing full damage at all ranges, it means Rein's shield dies even faster. 1400 health is a lot, but with every passing update to the game, it's starting to seem like it's still not enough. Reinhardt has the uncommon problem of struggling into almost every matchup. The price to pay for being a wholesome, honorable hero, I guess. Every role has some way to counter Reinhardt while still keeping the composition intact. You don't have to go some extreme Mercy Zen Pharah junk comp to beat him. C tier isn't impressive, but at least he's a lot better in lower ranks, where his shield doesn't get as chipped down and it's easier to take space. So does he need to be buffed? Not really, but his Earth Shadow takes a while to charge when you're forced to shield, which is most of the time in Overwatch 2. A slight, and I mean slight charge rate would give him more chances to counter tanks that normally beat him automatically. Orisa and Mauga bully him hard, but against Shatter they actually need to be careful, even though they can still tank it or cancel it with 6-second cooldowns. Maybe more than a slight buff wouldn't hurt. Next up is Winston, crowning C tier in a lackluster way. The armor ignoring buff hasn't made him noticeably better, although yes, mathematically you're killing Brig faster and building more ult charge while poking tanks, but it still feels like a microscopic change. Mauga's nerfs don't even really make Winston more viable because they make Mauga more killable, and Winston ideally isn't spending his time trying to kill Mauga. There's also a pretty important change this patch that affects Winston compositions. Ana's biotic nade duration is now only 3 seconds down from 3.5. That extra half second means a lot when you need to follow up on a big anti-nade. Winston alone is now way less likely to clean up the picks before the duration ends. In 3 seconds you can only deal 180 damage, and you won't even be dealing it from the start of the anti-effect unless you're up in their face already. Out of the bottom 4 tanks who wouldn't hurt a fly, he's at least the most viable and has a rare advantage into some of the better tanks. Sigma and Orisa are some of the most flexible frontline tanks out there, but even they can't kill Winston bubble fast enough before he gets his jump back. But as a massive close range tank, Winston has more to worry about outside of the tank matchup. Bastion, Torbjorn, Junkrat, basically all the defense heroes from Overwatch 1 if you remember that. They all make it a lot harder to survive both inside and outside the bubble. It feels really bad to not trust your one defensive ability to keep you in the fight, and for Winston, it's most of the time. Now for B tier, but the first tank here has been downgraded. Roadhog's been nerfed out of nowhere, targeting his healing. The cooldown between breather uses has been increased to 1.5 seconds. It was reduced from 8 to 1 in the initial rehaul, but he's now getting the Sigma treatment. His barrier cooldown used to be instant, and now it's at 2.5 seconds. 1.5 seconds may not seem like a lot, but there's an extra half second where you'll be taking full damage instead of the 40% reduced. In matchups where the enemy team can actually push and kill you if you don't get help, you'll be dying a lot more often. Funny enough, without this nerf, Roadhog would be a lot better into the rest of the changes this patch. Half a second decreased anti-nade duration would be great to cash in on if it didn't get added onto your breather to compensate. Finally, after all the build-up to where Mauga's gonna be after his nerfs, he's sitting in the middle of B tier. Most of his nerfs are just reverting the overkill buffs he got before his launch. At least it definitely worked. Mauga's damage output is strong but limited to close range. At mid to long ranges he's better than any other tank, but not to the point where you get consistent picks out of it. Skinny heroes still beat Mauga in 9 out of 10 duels. But for tanks it's the opposite. He still obliterates most tanks, and even if he can't force them back all the time, his high damage output forces a lot of defensive cooldowns. Overrun, Cardiac Overdrive, and Cage Fight are all still good as well. But I can safely say that nobody is excited to force him every game, now that you don't actually have to. His role as a hero is more undefined now, but before the nerfs it was just kill tank, don't die. Not really innovative and not really fun. At the top of B tier is D.Va, who is already one of the few tanks playable in Tamalga, although mostly on heavy high ground maps. But even so, she's one of the most valuable heroes to be good at because of how good she is on said maps. Playing dive is harder than most other comps because of how you have to set up, but D.Va starts off as a more defensive pick, controlling space and fighting people for the objective instead of gunning it for the backline. It's a lot easier to avoid trolling when you can zone players with your Matrix instead of forcing a dive on an Ana break duo 20 meters away every fight. D.Va's pretty high impact but also very linear. You fly around shooting or matrixing. Getting better at D.Va isn't really diversifying that playbook. You just fly around to the right places, shoot the right targets, and matrix the right abilities. A strong pick for sure, but even with infinite damage absorption, matrix is her only defensive ability. Using it aggressively is a lot harder, meaning less win conditions for you and your team. On to A tier, the first slot goes to Doomfist. Still the best dive tank, but at least not by very much. D.Va is less counterable, but Doomfist himself counters more heroes than you would think. His seismic slam punishes stack teams, and his punch is great for isolating supports. So many heroes fit into this category. Bastion, Mei, Kiriko, Lucio, he's got a great matchup into all of them. If you're not clean with your primary fire aim, I could definitely see Doom being a lot lower on the tier list, but not lower than B tier. Even with potato aim, seismic slam and rocket punch do so much against supports when they play together. And if they don't, as a dive hero, he's already ideal for picking off isolated heroes. The biggest problem with Doomfist right now is that even as an A tier hero, most of the heroes left on this list match him really well, or just counter him outright. The first of these goes to Junker Queen, who's been very consistently good for a while now. Even before the more recent Scattergun spread buff, she was solid. Being a brawl hero without needing a big healing investment is massive. Having a bad support combo like Lucio Zen or Lucio Break becomes an advantage with Queen's low maintenance and high damage playstyle. Queen's pick potential is insane thanks to how good her damage breakpoints are. 200 HP targets die to just 3 Scattergun shots, a knife and dax combo, a knife and Scattergun melee combo, or just 2 Scattergun shots and 2 melees. And of course, every knife you hit has a chance to make a play. Although Queen doesn't really struggle from a lack of ability, she is very weak into slows and stuns. Carnage is melee range, and if you can't get into that melee range without risking your life, you're missing out on a big part of your kit. And of course, the first hero in S tier has to be the top stunning tank, Orisa. She's made a pretty insane jump from being basically forgotten by the player base to being a crazy pick again. Let's talk the obvious first. Having no fall off at all is a really brave thing for the devs to do, considering how good Orisa was in Overwatch 1. Her fortified damage output are both really close to the best they've ever been, a scary sign for what's to come. At the very least, her skill ceiling has increased, now that you can deal full damage at further ranges with good enough projectile tracking. Putting Orisa all the way up in S tier may seem like an over-adjustment, but it's not only her fall off that's been removed. Her fortified now blocks all critical damage, including Malga's chain gun crits. Seems like a small, obvious quality of life change, but it actually turns the whole matchup around. Before, Malga countered Orisa and basically forced her to always play defensively, but now it's the complete opposite. It was really just the fortify weakness to Malga crits that made her weak. Now she actually wins the duel through just raw damage output. Orisa is also a top countering hero. Having a stun and a stun immunity helps a lot, but she still can't beat the next hero at the top, Sigma. He didn't even disappear during the Malga meta and was actually one of the only good heroes into him. His kit is one of the most well-rounded out there, and his specialty is spamming. Perfect for messy ranked games. I haven't mentioned many ultimates in this tier list, but Gravitic Flux always deserves a shout out. Sigma has almost everything it needs to be a perfect tank. A readily available barrier, high damage output all around, infinite damage absorption, and a ballbuster ultimate. He would be the #1 tank if not for some recent Omnic form changes that skew the tank tool in a different way. It's Ramatra taking the top spot in S tier. He's finally just right to be the #1 tank pick, at least for now. Finally, both of his forms are strong enough that he always has an impact in the fight. It doesn't take much practice to realize that you can absolutely delete people in the 1v1 with just your staff. All of Ram's cooldowns are strong competition for the most OP abilities in the game. His Nemesis form alone is one of the best defensive abilities. 225 armor instantly is wild, and just like Blizzard intended, makes him the ultimate tempo turning tank. And that's it for the tank tier list for mid-season 8. Almost a bigger shakeup than Malga dropping as a must-pick unkillable God Slayer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.